I was mid-sentence on a call with the Department of Labor when Brent strutted into the compliance wing like he'd just solved world hunger with a PowerPoint. He didn't knock, just walked in, grinning like the smug little rooster he was, and held up my ID badge like a trophy. "We're streamlining," he said, like he'd discovered a new continent. "These government forms? Pointless busywork. We'll have the intern take over." The intern, Kayla, looked up from her desk like someone had just handed her a live grenade. Before I could even hang up the phone, he turned to the admin and said, "Disable her clearance and transfer all compliance credentials to Kayla, effective immediately." There wasn't a meeting. There wasn't an off-boarding call. Not even a courtesy. "Thank you for holding this company together through 3 presidential administrations and 6 different audit cycles." I looked at my screen, still open to a federal portal page with multi-factor authentication tied to my identity, something you don't just reassign like a spreadsheet. But I didn't say a word. I stood, closed the laptop, placed my badge on the desk like it was a funeral urn, and walked out. And hey, if you're listening this far in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of you never do, and it helps more than you know. Keep stories like this alive, and trust me, it only gets wilder from here. By the time I made it to my car, I'd already been locked out of our internal Slack. The message on my phone read, "You've been removed from Linux Dynamics Workspace." Just like that. 9 years, 3 certifications, dozens of vendor renewals, gone like yesterday's printer ink. I sat behind the wheel for a second, not crying, not angry, just stunned at the level of corporate idiocy I'd just witnessed. Brent had no clue what I did. Not really. To him, I was just the woman who signed off on the annoying PDF packets, the one who always had too many windows open. What he didn't realize was that every single one of those busy work forms tied directly into active government certifications, contracts with the Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, and half the state of Missouri. And under federal compliance law, all of it had to go through one cleared liaison, me. But Brent didn't read that part. Or if he did, he thought he could outsmart it. He probably figured Kayla could just click resubmit, and the system would smile and say, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" That's not how federal systems work. That's not how clearance works. That's not how I work. I didn't go back into the office. I didn't send a farewell email. Instead, I drove home, poured myself a glass of seltzer, and opened the continuity manual I'd been writing for the past 6 months. Not for them, for me. My own little insurance policy, it wasn't stored on the cloud. It wasn't on any company device. Just a quiet, private archive documenting every portal, every certification path, every login string, and the process maps that made our federal access run like a well-oiled machine. You know what else I found that night? My termination letter, tucked inside a digital envelope like it was a birthday card. "We appreciate your service, but due to redundancy, your position has been eliminated." Redundancy. That one word was the pin that would blow their entire house of cards down. Because under Section 12.3 of our federal vendor agreement, if the designated compliance liaison is removed without formal reassignment, every active contract must be flagged for review. And guess what redundancy does? It severs continuity. No reassignment. No overlap. No clearance transfer. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to raise my voice or make a scene. All I had to do was wait. And across town, in a building full of people who thought federal compliance was just a paperwork formality, the countdown had already begun. I boxed my things that night without so much as a glance toward the glassed-in office where Brent was still holding court, probably telling some story about how he fixed compliance in under 10 minutes. There was no cake, no awkward card, not even one of those pitying shoulder squeezes from the HR intern who cried when they fired our janitor. Just me, alone, folding up 9 years of federal clearance level documentation into one cardboard box that I carried like a tombstone. My screensaver was still looping the flag from the Department of Energy's compliance interface, a little glitch I never fixed because I liked the symbolism. Reminder of the contracts we kept alive with nothing more than my signature and a stable Wi-Fi connection. Before I left, I connected a secure drive, opened a hidden folder labeled Rain Day Protocol, and quietly exported the full portal continuity manual I'd been building since 2020. It wasn't part of any training. It wasn't logged in any SOP. It was mine. Drafted during every late-night patch update, every emergency workaround, every time I had to escalate through an agency contact who only answered my calls. Because I'd built a reputation for not screwing up. Once it was saved and triple encrypted, I shut the laptop and left it on the desk. Not because I was being generous, but because I knew they wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I poured a glass of bourbon. Not to celebrate, not even to mourn, just to mark the shift. Something had changed. Not in me, but around me. They thought I was gone. They thought non-essential meant forgettable. That's the thing about people like Brent. They think the badge is the job. They don't realize sometimes the badge is just a symbol of what only one person knows how to do. I opened the email from HR again. Voluntary redundancy. They really thought that phrasing sounded clean, elegant even. But what it really did, legally, was nuke their compliance lineage. Under federal contractor regulations, when a certified liaison is terminated without a direct replacement before revocation, all systems tied to that clearance have to be paused, pending recertification. It's not a request. It's a flag. Automatic, non-negotiable. You don't just hand off a clearance badge like it's a company car. And that's when I made the call. Just one, not to a lawyer, not to a whistleblower hotline, to an old contact at Strat Secure, a federal compliance contractor I'd quietly advised back in 2019 during the big overhaul for Defense Tier 3 onboarding. He picked up before the second ring. Still looking for someone with active clearance and back-end experience across energy, transport, and health? I asked. He laughed. Not the funny kind, the finally kind. We've been waiting for someone like you, he said. 10 minutes later, the paperwork was moving. Digital onboarding, clearance verification, a courier scheduled to drop off an encrypted laptop by 7 a.m., the gears of a new machine turning quietly in the background, while my old one stalled and sputtered, completely unaware that the mechanic had left the building. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I didn't text coworkers. I didn't update my email signature with a motivational quote. I just stared at the phrase again. Voluntary redundancy. What they didn't realize was that the clearance wasn't tied to the badge they took from me. It was tied to the name they erased from their system. And without that name, the government systems weren't going to listen to anyone else. The courier dropped the Strat Secure laptop at 6:52 a.m. on Monday. No knock, no small talk, just a metal case with a digital padlock and a note that read, Tier 3 credential embedded. Activate from secure line. That was it. No HR orientation, no access badge photo op. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I didn't need a tour. I knew the landscape better than the people who thought they owned it. By 8:15, I was logged in from a secure desk in a nondescript co-working space 2 miles from my old office. The kind of place with frosted windows and no company logos, just long hallways and cold brew on tap for the few who knew where to look. A Strat Secure director had texted, "We don't need a warm-up, just keep the lights on." That was the kind of onboarding I respected. No ego, no ceremony, just function. By 9:03, I was looking at the Lennox Dynamics federal portal from the outside for the first time, and it was already blinking. Not red, not yet. Just pulsing amber. A federal systems version of a raised eyebrow. The kind of soft warning that said, someone forgot the rules. The automation flag was live. Key liaison, status unknown. That's what happens when you remove a name from a clearance database without certifying a successor. The system doesn't crash, it waits. And while it waits, everything stops. Purchase orders, access tokens, quarterly form cycles, all of it held behind a wall that won't open unless the exact identity with the clearance signs back in, or someone new goes through a 6-week certification process, which, spoiler alert, Kayla the intern was not even remotely prepared for. By Tuesday morning, I received a ping from a public procurement bulletin. Contract ID 4047B suspended pending continuity verification. That was the Department of Energy contract, $4.7 million over 3 years, halted mid-cycle. Brent probably didn't even know it existed. It was one of those inherited legacy contracts that no one paid attention to until something broke. By noon, 2 more followed. Department of Health. Form 1187C marked unverified authority, and the Department of Transportation's web portal showing submission incomplete, signature not valid. That last one? It meant the state couldn't process highway reimbursement invoices. Translation: they couldn't get paid. All because someone tried to hand my signature over to a 24-year-old intern with no clearance, no password token, and no clue what any of it actually meant. By Thursday, the State Procurement Board flagged Lennox publicly. Not an angry call, not a lawsuit. Worse, a quiet, bureaucratic note. Affidavit 19E missing for Q4, contract status, under review. In the world of federal vendors, those three words, under review, are a death sentence whispered politely. You don't get flagged for corruption. You get quietly benched until someone who knows how the scaffolding was built shows up and convinces the system to trust you again. But no one at Lennox could do that. Brent had never logged into the portal once. HR didn't even know the names of half the agencies we were certified under. And legal? Legal was still working off a compliance map from 2017. Me, I didn't need to move fast. I didn't need to move at all. The system was already moving for me, one flag at a time, cascading through the infrastructure like dominoes built by someone who knew exactly where each one would fall. And across town, in a conference room with one too many marketing posters about disruption, Brent was probably refreshing a browser that wouldn't load, wondering why the intern's new login still couldn't access the Form 19 tab. It was only Thursday. I hadn't lifted a finger, but the scaffolding was already groaning. And nobody remembered who used to hold the wrench. They started with the easiest lie. It's a system bug. Brent, red-faced and pacing in his glass cage of an office, apparently told the project managers it was a software update gone wrong, something about a mismatch in API tokens or a recent upgrade in the federal interface, anything to avoid saying the truth out loud, that he'd booted the only person who knew how to keep the blood flowing in the body of that organization. I heard all this secondhand, of course. My phone stayed off, inbox clean, Slack notifications silent. But the whispers came in anyway, through procurement reps, compliance consultants, even a former coworker who texted, "What the hell did you build? Everything's falling apart." What did I build? A skeleton. A system so intertwined with my clearance, my digital fingerprint, my logic trees, that removing me without the proper reassignment wasn't just a mistake. It was a self-inflicted lobotomy. Kayla was told to just resubmit the forms. Like that would work. She clicked where she was told, typed her name, selected her title from a drop-down that didn't recognize her as anything more than an intern with a soft smile and a business major. Then the portal spit back a rejection notice, authorization level insufficient, submission denied. They tried resetting my credentials. Of course they did. I had warned them once in an offhand comment over coffee that you can't just reset federal clearance like a Facebook password. IT clicked around anyway. Brent barked orders. Someone tried to spoof my login token using archived credentials until the system flagged the attempt as a security violation and permanently revoked the ID. That's the part most companies don't understand. Clearance is a relationship between a name and a system. You can't Frankenstein that bond together from someone else's login and a polite request. Then came the calls. Not angry, just curious. Procurement officers from state and federal departments started reaching out, not to complain, but to ask, "Hi, we're trying to verify Form 91 through your portal, but your listed compliance officer no longer shows up in the clearance database. Can you confirm who your new liaison is?" And that, right there, was the nail they didn't see going in, because they had no answer. They couldn't name anyone. No official handoff, no reassignment form filed. No certified training logs, nothing. Just a gaping hole where my name used to be. By the end of week 2, the silence turned costly. 7 agencies froze active payments, citing pending verification. 1. An infrastructure vendor tied to the Department of Transportation canceled entirely. Brent tried to rally with a statement to the board. "We're experiencing a temporary backlog glitch. It's being resolved." Temporary. Glitch. I could almost hear him saying it in that same patronizing tone he used when he handed my badge to the admin like it was a coffee order. Meanwhile, in my quiet office 2 cities over, I watched the procurement boards like a weatherman watching storm clouds build. Not panicking, just noting. The red flags, the delays, the cascade. Distant satisfaction is a strange thing. It doesn't come with fireworks or champagne. It's just a slow burn behind the ribs, knowing you don't have to lift a finger to see gravity do its job. Let the interns click. Let Brent shout. Let it flail. They were standing on scaffolding I built with bare hands and sleepless nights, and now they were shaking it with every clueless move. And me? I was just sipping tea, watching it all tilt. Legal didn't get involved until it was too late for plausible deniability. It happened on a Wednesday, 2.5 weeks post-termination, when the Department of Transportation kicked back a submission packet with a formal note that read, Form 37E Invalid. Signature field missing Tier 3 clearance from designated authorized custodian. Nothing dramatic, just a simple federal memo that essentially said, we're done here until you fix this mess. Brent forwarded the email with a one-line question. Can we just reassign the form? Legal opened the vendor agreements, started at the top. Page after page of acronyms and compliance language they'd skimmed through 100 times before, until they hit Clause 9C, a section tucked between engagement renewal terms and reporting timelines, the kind of clause no one ever thinks about until it detonates. All federal engagement is void, it read, if the designated contact is removed without formal replacement certified through Tier 3 clearance. There it was, written in dry legal ink, no wiggle room, no vague phrasing, just absolute procedural law, and next to it, in plain type, was my name. The name Brent had stripped from the system without even filing a successor form. Not delayed, not transferred, just deleted. They hadn't reassigned me, they hadn't even demoted me, they'd erased me, and that's not just carelessness in the federal world. That's a non-compliance event. The kind that shuts down contracts, revokes credentials, and sparks internal audits from agencies that don't bother asking twice. HR had it on record. Position reassigned, non-essential. That phrasing wasn't just insulting, it was legally radioactive, because non-essential means no redundancy protocol was triggered, which means continuity was broken, which means Clause 9C had been breached the moment Brent tossed my badge on a desk like it was a sandwich order. When legal called IT, they confirmed my Tier 3 token had been permanently revoked after the failed reset attempts, which means reinstating my identity wasn't even possible without restarting the clearance process from scratch. A 60-day endeavor on a good day, assuming there's no backlog and no flagged anomalies, which there were, several. Somewhere in that meeting, someone probably said, we need to talk to her. I imagine the silence that followed, because by now they'd realized I wasn't reachable. I hadn't posted. I hadn't written a scathing resignation letter. I hadn't even badmouthed the company on Glassdoor. I was just gone. No longer tethered to their systems, no longer under their control, and no longer obligated to fix the hole they'd punched through the side of their compliance hull. I didn't need to be loud. I didn't need to gloat. My absence was speaking louder than I ever could. They were only just now discovering the kind of backbone that doesn't show up in HR databases or Slack threads, the kind built from years of late-night federal audits, last-minute procurement rewrites, and high-stakes form recoveries that no one ever thanked me for, but everyone quietly relied on. And now? That backbone had left the building, and with it, so had their right to operate. The first email hit inboxes at 8:07 a.m., sharp, Eastern Time, no dramatic subject line, no flashing red alert. Just a line of text that might as well have been chiseled in stone. Effective immediately, all federal engagements with Linux Dynamics are suspended pending review. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't scream. It silences. Everyone. The second email followed less than a minute later, stamped 8:08 a.m., this time from the Office of Federal Vendor Oversight. Until your prior authorized contact, or a certified successor, passes clearance, all portal functions remain disabled. No room for argument. No room for interpretation. Just cold protocol doing what it was designed to do. Stop everything when a security chain breaks. The board was already in session by 9. Brent walked in late. His tie was loose. His folder was empty, his mouth full of excuses. We had a system migration. Old documentation workflows weren't updated. IT missed the handoff. Legal didn't flag the clearance dependency. The board chair didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just opened the printed report from the Federal Oversight Office, flipped to the highlighted paragraph, and read it aloud for the room. You removed a federally cleared contact with no replacement. That's a Class 2 procedural breach under Contract Integrity Standard 4.117b. The word breach echoed like a gavel. Brent stared. His face didn't go red. It went pale. Because this wasn't about one missed form anymore. It wasn't even about the canceled contracts. This was about liability, the kind that sends companies into regulatory purgatory, the kind that triggers federal vendor blacklists and mandatory oversight audits that last for years, the kind that attaches itself to every contract bid like a shadow. And Brent had just handed it to them, on a silver platter. The CFO leaned forward. Can we reinstate the contact? Legal shook her head. Her clearance is revoked. We'd have to start from scratch, resubmit the full liaison credentialing, rebuild the documentation trail, trigger background re-verification. That's if she even agrees. Silence. Then someone, probably the head of sales, whose bonuses depended on those now suspended contracts, muttered the unspoken truth. There's no intern who can fix this. No one laughed. No one defended Brent. No one said, this wasn't your fault. Because it was. He'd mistaken the scaffolding for the wallpaper. He thought compliance was a matter of convenience, not clearance, that the forms were forms, not federal obligations, that the woman who handled them was just another name on payroll, disposable, redundant. But now, the consequences weren't hypothetical. They were quantifiable, tied up in frozen funds, burned relationships, and a federal notice that would haunt every future contract bid. Across the river, I sipped my coffee while syncing the latest security protocols into the Strat Secure system. I hadn't lifted a finger, just held the key. And now the door was shut. By Monday, it wasn't just Lennox's internal systems that were freezing, it was their reputation. Word moves fast in federal circles, faster than most executives realize. Compliance offices are small, interconnected, gossipy in their own bureaucratic way. One flagged account becomes 5 suspicious inquiries. 5 turn into a database alert. And soon, your vendor risk score, once pristine, is circling the drain. Lennox Dynamics dropped from Tier 1 to Tier 3 in less than 72 hours. Procurement dashboards across half a dozen agencies updated their threat indicators. And just like that, 2 major departments quietly slid the company off their preferred vendor lists. No drama, no phone call, just absence where there used to be auto-renewals. That's the thing about federal contracts. Trust is currency, and Brent had bankrupted them without even realizing it. My inbox, meanwhile, told a different story. It started with a short Strat Secure briefing. No logos, no fluff. Just a concise memo addressed to key procurement leads. Continuity liaison available for immediate contract stabilization. Tier 3 clearance active. Protocols maintained per original frameworks. No begging, no marketing campaign, just the truth, presented clean. By noon, the responses started. Can we transfer oversight of Project Railtrack 7B? Would Strat Secure be open to absorbing the lifecycle management of our compliance framework? We'd like to initiate a vendor realignment under your direct supervision. How soon can we schedule a transition call? One by one, the contracts I'd once shepherded under Lennox were rerouted, restructured, reassigned. Not with threats, not with revenge, just process, because when the smoke cleared, I was still the one who knew where the wires were buried, still the one who had the playbooks memorized, still the name the systems recognized, and most importantly, still the only person the agencies trusted to keep their operations off the federal audit radar. Former coworkers began reaching out, cautiously at first. Hey, I know things got weird, but do you have a copy of the 1187 routing logic? I wasn't involved in how that went down, but if there's any way to smooth the invoice freezes, could you... Not gossip, not pity, help. But I didn't reply. Not out of malice, out of clarity. My job was no longer to patch holes in a ship that tried to toss me overboard. My job was to steer a better one, let them sit in the wake. Let them realize that the silence wasn't absence, it was precision. The kind that rebuilds what others squandered. No need for a comeback tour, no LinkedIn post, no glass-raising celebration. Just contracts. realigned, renamed, and reactivated, all under Strat Secure, all under me, exactly where they should have been all along. Brent's resignation didn't make a sound. No farewell memo, no press release. Just a line in the HR system that read, status inactive and a sudden removal from the executive Slack channels. I heard he left the building at 7:13 a.m., before the coffee was even hot, avoided the board, didn't even clean out his desk. One of the assistants boxed his things in silence, like it was a funeral. It was a mercy exit, if we're being honest. The only humane thing left after he walked the company off a regulatory cliff with that smug grin and zero comprehension of the systems he was gutting. By then, the board had connected the dots. Every breach, every contract frozen, every dollar halted in escrow, it all traced back to the moment he disabled my credentials without a successor. That's when Lennox's legal finally reached out. The email was careful, almost reverent in tone. We'd like to discuss the possibility of re-engaging your services under contract to restore federal continuity and operational clearance. We understand the value you brought. We'd like to make things right. They didn't send it to me directly. They sent it to Strat Secure, and Strat Secure sent a reply. Not aggressive, not emotional, just precise. Any consideration of service reinstatement will require the following terms. Permanent transfer of 10 active federal contracts to Strat Secure custody, full indemnity clause against any past procedural violations during transition, written confirmation that no prior Lennox management will be reinstated or granted oversight authority. That was it. We expected pushback, a negotiation. Instead, we got signatures by the next morning. It was desperation in its cleanest form. No haggling, no edits, just digital ink confirming what they now understood. This wasn't about rehiring a person. It was about reclaiming the only functional bridge to the systems they'd burned. But I didn't go back. Not for a tour, not for a debrief, not even for the satisfaction of watching them squirm. I never crossed the threshold of that office again. Within a week, the federal forms were updated. Every portal page, every contract header, every submission flow. Where it once said, Lennox Dynamics Authorized Contact, now it read, Strat Secure LLC, Compliance Custodian. My name. The shift was quiet, like all good power transfers are. No press coverage, no scandal. Just one logo fading and another one taking its place. Attached to the same protocols, the same routing maps, the same logic trees I'd built over nearly a decade. Only now, they weren't tied to people who thought busy work was beneath them. They were under my care, my terms, my control. Because power doesn't live in titles. It doesn't wear a suit or carry a badge. It lives in the systems, in the quiet architecture, in the clearance keys only one person ever knew how to carry. And I carried them out the door. Now they're mine. It happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind where nothing seems significant. Gray light through the blinds, inbox humming with the usual low-level government chaos. I was logging into the federal compliance dashboard to check on a renewal timeline when I saw it. The footer had changed. Just a small update. No banner, no announcement. Authorized liaison. My name. Strat Secure LLC. Clearance validated. Below that, in a smaller line, like a footnote to a chapter someone wished they could delete, Lennox Dynamics, contractor retired. No drama, no fireworks, just fact. I stared at it for a long time, not out of surprise, but because of how quiet it felt. There's something surreal about seeing the final dot placed on a story other people thought they were writing without you. This was the last keystroke, the legal equivalent of a full stop, the dashboard that once tethered me to sleepless nights, audit deadlines, 11th hour form rescues. Now clean, streamlined, humming under Strat Secure's banner. My protocols, my clearance, my rhythm. A week later, I was invited to a federal procurement summit in D.C., not as a guest, but as a panelist. The topic was continuity risk in government contracting. I wore a black blazer, simple, no logo, just presence. Midway through the panel, one of the agency heads leaned into his mic and chuckled. Let this be a reminder. Always know who maintains your forms, because the day they leave, the lights might not come back on. A few in the audience laughed, not nervously, just knowingly. I didn't say anything, just raised my coffee, sipped. Let the silence do its work. They ran a short presentation near the end, case studies in compliance failures. There, without names, but with very familiar graphs, was Lennox's collapse timeline. The moment of credential revocation, the contract freezes, the risk score nosedive, a dotted line charting the loss of federal trust. Next slide, how StratSecure restored the same contracts in under a month. No narration, just data. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because while the execs at Lennox had been busy congratulating themselves for cutting overhead, they forgot one thing. Overhead doesn't carry Tier 3 clearance. Overhead doesn't take 2 a.m. calls from the Department of Energy when a security patch fails. Overhead doesn't build a decade's worth of interlocked systems, then walk out with the only working key. They called it busywork. Turns out, it was the lock, and I was the only one holding the key.